Ugh, we need to talk about the ban. Actually, again, not a ban, technically just a forced sale. Because the current news discussion seems to miss the underlying strategic problems that companies are facing right now, which leaves us with three major points to cover, including a clever enforcement mechanism that Congress hid in the ban bill. To start with some background, if you want the full story of what is happening here, I covered the original ban when Congress first passed the law. But the basic idea is a classic lines on maps problem. National security officials worry about the influence that the Chinese Communist Party has over the app, which swings the balance of coercive capacity in China's favor vis-a-vis the United States, should the Chinese Communist Party one day compel the seizure of TikTok data. For its part, TikTok claims that it has no such intentions to divulge that information, but it cannot credibly commit to that pledge when push comes to shove, and so we end up back here. This is not particularly strange. There are all sorts of national security exceptions to free speech laws in the United States, and this is just another one of them. Apologies to Zoomers everywhere. That takes us to the meat of the story, with the turnover of control of the Oval Office. The ban took effect on January 19th, one day before Joe Biden transferred power to Donald Trump. Biden basically punted on the issue and left it to Trump to enforce. Say what you will about that, but it hardly makes sense for a policy to last a single day. Regardless, during that period of uncertainty, TikTok chose to go dark on its own. This appears to be a deliberate strategy by the company to create a public backlash to the law, because the law itself only stops the distribution and maintenance of the app by hosting services, which primarily means that Apple and Google are the ones that have to take the active steps. That, in turn, is because they control the App Store and Google Play. In essence, the Biden-era bill enforces the shutdown by telling Apple and Google that they cannot allow new downloads or security updates to the app. Thus, over time, TikTok slowly dissolves into the abyss. Anyway, that allowed Trump to play the role of app savior. The then President-elect Trump announced that he would delay enforcement of the law for 90 days, which later became 75 days once he entered office, notably with the TikTok CEO in attendance at the inauguration. TikTok the app suddenly rose from the ashes, though was still unavailable on the app stores. But now we must draw a distinction between actual laws and executive orders. And here is problem number one with the standard discussion surrounding this. The belief that Trump has the ability, through executive order, to change the law, which will somehow rescue the app. That is not how the US Constitution works. To pass a law the normal way, you need majorities in both congressional chambers to approve the bill, and then you need the president's signature. And until that happens, the existing bill is the law of the land. Well, it turns out that the double majority thing is a big problem. Congress hates TikTok. The original vote was a bipartisan 360 to 58 in the House, and another bipartisan 79 to 18 in the Senate. Elizabeth Warren and Tom Cotton both voted to ban it. They are normally this far apart on political issues, but TikTok brought them together. It would be a feel-good story about America if it were not a serious question about national security. Then again, it also united Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders against it. Politics in the modern era is weird. Anyway, Biden signed it as well, giving us the law that we know of today. And yes, there has been an election in the interim. But no, the composition in Congress has not changed enough to flip preferences on TikTok. Indeed, the Republican House Majority Leader is not about to modify the law. This whole thing is by design. The entire point of the Constitution is to make it difficult to change the status quo unless there is substantial consensus. In other words, this is the law of the land, and the law of the land is frozen for now. That takes us to the second problem here, or the 48th problem, referring to whomever becomes the 48th president of the United States. To be blunt, Trump's refusal to enforce the law is not going to convince the service providers to restore TikTok. Not without greater assurances, anyway. As a starting point, the 90-day extension was built into the original law in the event that a buyer was identified, and there needed to be more time to complete a deal. Very reasonably, legislators did not want to have the app collapse in value in the meantime, thereby sabotaging the possibility of a transfer. Now, a bunch of groups have made proposals, but there is no serious possibility of a sale at the moment, in large part because China seems to be taking a stance of no negotiations on the subject, and TikTok parent company ByteDance does not want to signal to other countries that there is room to compromise. You can add to that the problem that TikTok's algorithm itself is not for sale, just the interface and user base, ostensibly because the algorithm is a national security priority for China, which ironically reinforces Congress's point. So, already, this is sketchy legal territory. But let's turn it up to 11 and suppose that Trump announces that he has no plans to enforce the law ever. That still will not convince Apple or Google to do anything, again, not without greater assurances. The main problem here is that the law permits fines to be levied up to 5 years after the fact, which takes us to 2030. Donald Trump is term limited, so someone else new will be sworn in on January 20th, 2029, absent some sort of crazy constitutional amendment. Whether that is J.D. Vance, my University of Rochester nemesis Josh Shapiro, or whoever else, is beside the point. If that person wants to, they could activate the law at that later time. And the damages could be massive. The fines are $5,000 per user. There is the full text for those of you who are interested in it. But TikTok claims that 170 million US users exist. Do some multiplication, and you wind up with $850 billion in potential fines. By comparison, Apple has a market capitalization of $3.46 trillion. Google parent company Alphabet is worth $2.41 trillion. Okay, maybe the companies can appeal to the Supreme Court, claiming that the president said that the law was not going to be enforced, and so they should not be on the hook for any fines. Indeed, that is what Trump declared in his executive order. Now, I am not a lawyer, but that sounds like a sketchy legal argument. Moreover, it is worth noting that the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in favor of the constitutionality of the ban when TikTok motioned for a last-minute reprieve. That's right, TikTok got these two to agree on something. And even if you were very optimistic and thought that you would only lose 10% of the time, that is still $85 billion in expected fines, and so that is still a non-starter. And if you forget, plenty of congressional officials would be happy to remind you. But there is an even deeper problem for those companies within the next 4 years, and it comes from Trump himself. Again, I am not going to enforce it is not law. Rather, it is abdicating the executive's role in making the law have meaning. The potential for massive fines are still there, though, and as long as that is the case, Trump has leverage over those companies. Do my bidding, or I'm going to fine you billions of dollars, is a pretty effective way of getting a company to buckle in any way you see fit, or at least up to the expected value of the fines. As a result, the service providers are not yet deviating from the law. And if they do, you can bet that there will be some shareholders demanding answers. A middle ground option would be to approach the court and ask for a declaratory judgment, which would preemptively tell the companies whether the $850 billion in potential fines would be applicable. That would also help resolve the 48th problem from earlier here. But those guys seem so far away, and you can already tell that it is going to be a busy 4 years. Well, that's it for today. If you missed it, I had a long Q&A over on the Lines on Maps Extra channel about Trump's new term. Go check it out. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. and I will see you next time. Take care.